On today's show, our winners and losers from SEC Week 8. It was a condensed week, several teams off. We'll give you our biggest takeaways from the weekend. Also, another condensed week in Week 9. We'll take a look at some of the early betting lines for this Saturday. And Bryce Young or Matt Corral, who's your Heisman favorite? We'll give you some stats on both of them. Locked on SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And a welcome into Locked On SEC, everybody. It's great to have you along. I am Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Remember, Locked On SEC is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and at LockedOnSEC.com. All right, we got plenty to jump into. Let's do it. Let's get to our winners of the weekend.
Winner. And now, your winners of the weekend.
Real winners win.
You know you're looking at a winner. 'Cause I'm a winner. Yeah, I'm a winner.
And we start with a guy who was a little shaky early on in this one. Tennessee was blitzing up a storm, getting pressure in his face. But as the game went along, Bryce Young used his legs to buy some time, and he finished the day accounting for 400 total yards, 4 total touchdowns in Alabama's 52-24 win over Tennessee. Big days from John Mechie and Jamison Williams to help him out. Young is really having an outstanding season. He has accounted for almost 2,500 passing yards, 26 passing touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. He is going to keep his name firmly in the Heisman conversation, and he'll have a chance to add to his stats with upcoming games. Check out this slate. New Mexico State, LSU, Arkansas. Yeah, Bryce Young is going to add to those stat totals, and he will be in the Heisman contention at the end of the year. The question is, who do you like more, him or Matt Corral? We'll get the Corral stats in just a little bit. Another winner of the weekend, how about Alabama running back Brian Robinson Jr.? The Alabama running back had 26 carries, 107 yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. He also had 4 catches for 16 yards. It was his third 100-yard rushing game of the season and his third multi-rushing touchdown game of the year. He is over 700 rushing yards for the season, 11 rushing touchdowns, really becoming the workhorse of that backfield for Alabama. He's doing a really nice job. Remember, he was a little slow out of the gates the first few weeks, but he has picked it up the last few. Another winner of the weekend. Now, hear me out on this one. Josh Heupel. Why is Josh Heupel a winner of the weekend if his team lost by 28 points? Well, it's because his team was only down 7 in the fourth quarter on the road at Alabama. You've got to consider what the offseason was like for this Tennessee team. Roster overhaul, tons of transfers, everybody jumping ship. And in just a few months' time, Heupel has put together a team that is 4-4 overall, getting much improved quarterback play, and they were hanging around with top 5 Alabama into the fourth quarter. Just imagine what Heupel is going to be able to do with a couple of solid recruiting classes. Man, you got to give him props. If you're a Vol fan today, you do not hang your head. I know it was the fourth quarter, but there are brighter days ahead for Tennessee fans, and that is because of Josh Heupel. You also need to give some props to Vols receiver Cedric Tillman. 7 catches, 152 yards, and a touchdown. His biggest performance in his 4 years at Tennessee. Really nice day for him. And then also a shout out to Hendon Hooker through a costly fourth quarter interception, but he played well for most of the game, throwing for 282 yards and 3 touchdowns. Used his running ability. They just ran out of gas down the stretch, but props to Josh Heupel. I think he's going to be just fine there at Tennessee. Another winner of the weekend, I'm going with the entire Ole Miss backfield. Snoop Connor, Jerrion Ealy, they put on a clinic versus the LSU defense on Saturday as Ole Miss rushed for 266 yards as a team. Snoop Connor had 117 rushing yards. Ealy had 97 yards rushing. Henry Parrish added a touchdown. They were dominant, man, and the Ole Miss rushing attack one of the best in the country. I know Matt Corral grabs so much of the headlines, but Ole Miss leads the SEC in rushing yards per game at 263, just ahead of Florida and Arkansas, and they are third in the country in rushing yards. Unbelievable. You got to be balanced to win, and Ole Miss is balanced. Another winner of the weekend. I'm throwing Matt Corral in there. The reason because he was banged up a week ago in that game at Tennessee. Late in that game, he was taking hit after hit after hit. I know there were some questions. Is he even going to play this week against LSU? I know Lane Kiffin kept alluding to it all last week, but Matt Corral played. And against LSU, he was 18 for 23, 185 yards with a touchdown. Also had a rushing touchdown. He just really didn't need to do much this week. His rushing attack did all the work for him as Ole Miss won 31-17 over LSU. Now, Matt Corral now has 2,300 combined yards on the season with 24 combined touchdowns. He's only got one interception. He is up there in the Heisman race with Bryce Young. The question is, who's in the driver's seat right now, in your opinion? If you're an Ole Miss fan, you probably have Matt Corral. If you're an Alabama fan, you probably have Bryce Young. The question is, for the rest of the SEC fans out there, who is your leader? We'll discuss that throughout the week because these next few weeks, once we get into November, this is where the Heisman, if you go look at just the last few years, the winner of the Heisman Trophy has really separated himself from the pack. You think of so many of the guys who were maybe in the driver's seat heading into the last month of full games of the season. This is where the men separate themselves from the boys. Another winner of the weekend, I'm going with the Texas A&M backfield. Devon Achane, 20 carries, 154 yards, and a touchdown. Isaiah Spiller, 18 carries, 102 yards, and a score. Texas A&M having a lot of success these past few weeks because they've gotten back to their dominant run game. They put up almost 300 rush yards on South Carolina this week. Zach Calzada continues to play well, but with a run game like this, it's not a whole lot he has to do. Just don't mess it up. It's also good to see the Aggies utilizing their tight end, Jalen Watermeyer, again. He had 4 catches for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. A&M with a real chance now to run the table and finish this thing out strong. So props to Jimbo Fisher. They won that Alabama game, and, man, they've been on a roll ever since. Our last winner of the weekend, I'm throwing KJ Jefferson and Arkansas in here. I know the Razorbacks, they had a layup game at home against Arkansas Pine Bluff, but they won 45-3. They snapped their 3-game losing streak. KJ Jefferson threw for 4 touchdowns, and the Razorbacks got themselves to 5-3 overall. Treylon Burks, he caught a couple of touchdown passes, but the Razorbacks are in a good spot here. They still have to play at Alabama. That's brutal. But their other 3 games, Mississippi State, Missouri, and at LSU, all winnable games. So I think a lot of Hog fans, if you ask them, would you take 8-4 with this brutal schedule that they had, they would absolutely take that this year. So it is doable for the Razorbacks. We'll see if they're able to get to 8 wins this year. And that is winners of the weekend. Thank you guys again for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll give you our depressed of the weekend that was. Need to remind you guys about our friends over at PrizePicks. If you're a college football fanatic and you haven't tried out PrizePicks yet, go download the app. It is daily fantasy made easy. I love it, and I know you guys will too. PrizePicks, they offer more college football props than anyone in the world. They offer all the star players from the Power 5. They got just about any prop you can think of, from yardage to touchdowns, interceptions thrown, whatever it is, you can find it at PrizePicks. All of our users that sign up today and deposit, use our promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON. You're going to receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So if you put $100 in, they'll match it and give you an extra $100. You pick 2 to 5 players, the over/under on projections. You can win up to 10 times on any entry. It is just you versus the projected numbers. Why don't you go check them out? Use their award-winning app. You can find them on both the App Store and Google Play. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. PrizePicks is safe. They offer fast withdrawals. Don't hesitate. Go check them out. PrizePicks.com. Use our promo code LOCKEDON or go to the App Store. Download it today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Rolling along here, Locked On SEC, and we gave you our winners of the weekend already. Now we got to get to our depressed. Who depressed us this weekend across the SEC? And I'm going to start with the LSU run game. Look, just a week after they set the single-game rushing record against Florida, LSU running back Ty Davis-Price was bottled up by the Ole Miss defense of all teams. They held him to just 53 yards on 17 carries, just 3 yards a carry after he averaged 8 yards a carry the week prior. He did have a rushing touchdown, but LSU as a team had 35 carries for a net of just 77 yards. Man, they looked so good in that rushing attack a week ago against Florida. It just was not working this weekend in Oxford. And LSU just found themselves getting routed by the Rebels. It was an impressive win for Ole Miss. But remember, we said for so long, it was Ole Miss's defense going to look like this year? They can play like they did against LSU this past week. And Ole Miss have a real good chance to run the table and be in the conversation for a New Year's Six Bowl. Another depressed of the weekend. Now, look, I debated whether I should put Zeb Noland in here. The quarterback turned grad assistant turned quarterback. Just did not do much in South Carolina's 44-14 loss at Texas A&M. Nolan was just 7 for 12 for only 30 yards. Man, did he take some monster hits from that Texas A&M defense. I almost thought we should put him in the impressed category just because of the hits that he took, because he took an absolute beating. After the game, Shane Beamer said Zeb Noland was bloody just about everywhere after the game. He gave way to Jason Brown in this one. Brown came in and threw for a touchdown and 2 interceptions. But, man, Zeb Noland, he's going to be the guy the rest of the year. May not get much easier down the stretch. Another depress of the weekend, I'm going with the South Carolina rushing attack. I know Texas A&M's defense is good, but, man, what happened to that dominant South Carolina ground game from just a year ago? Was that all Mike Bobo and Will Muschamp? Kevin Harris has just never been able to get himself fully healthy. He had 2 carries for 0 yards this week. That guy was one of the best running backs in the SEC a year ago. So Quandre Wyatt and Marshawn Lloyd, they did all they could this week, but as a team, the Gamecocks rushed 31 times for a net of just 71 yards. South Carolina, look, they're at a respectable 4-4, but they are just 1-4 in the SEC. And the question now is, can they get to 6 wins? Can they get to bowl eligible? They have got a road game at Mizzou. That is winnable. But then they have home games against Florida, Auburn, and Clemson. I know Florida and Clemson have both taken some losses this year, and they're not their old dominant selves. But the question is South Carolina good enough to beat either of them? We will see. But can you find 2 wins on that schedule down the stretch for the Gamecocks? Another depress of the weekend, Vandy. They just struggle to find any positives each week. They lose at home to Mississippi State, 45-6, 155 yards of total offense. Vandy falls to 2-6 overall, 0-4 in the SEC. Clark Lee, man, he's just really got to get through this season, and then I would be hitting the transfer portal like crazy. Try to find 1 or 2 big-time playmakers, maybe a dual-threat quarterback, somebody that could come in and help improve this team next season. Senior quarterback Mike Wright, he did all he could at quarterback this week. They're just limited. Their defense has some moments where they play okay, but against Mike Leach's air raid offense, they just did not have much of an answer. And our last depressed of the weekend, I'm going with the Alabama special teams. They missed a field goal, had a punt blocked, a roughing the punter penalty. They did have a 46-yard return, but overall, just sloppy play by the Crimson Tide special teams unit. That block punt really gave Tennessee some life in the third quarter, led to a Volunteers field goal. Special teams coordinator Drew Svoboda going to need to clean some things up and do so very quickly for Alabama. Again, Alabama just become so accustomed to playing elite level of play on both sides of the ball. And special teams, they finally have found a kicker in recent years. Well, Reichard able to make some field goals. But, man, this week, special teams was just a mess for Alabama. Got to clean that up if they're going to run the table. And presumably a lot of people think they will and get into the college football playoff. There you go. Short list of our deep press this week, just because not a lot of games to that were played. Thank you guys again for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at some early betting lines. That's coming up next. Need to remind you guys about our friends at Built Bar, which is the best tasting protein bar ever. If you guys haven't tried Built Bar out yet by now, you're really missing out. They say it's a protein bar, but it doesn't taste like one. You've got to try one of their amazing bars yourself to believe it. Many protein bars, if you go to some of these shops after, you go to the gym or work out, you buy them, you eat them, they're just chalky, waxy, or even just hard to swallow. A Built Bar, soft, covered in 100% real chocolate. When you bite into it, you know you're eating something different. It's more of an experience, one that you will enjoy. In fact, you will swear you're just eating a candy bar. Built Bar's also low carb, low calorie, low fat, low sugar, high in protein, all the healthy benefits on top of just being purely delicious. And they got so many flavors, from the coconut to raspberry, the mint brownie, which is my favorite. That is yet another great thing about Built Bar. So go check them out right now at their website, built.com, BUILT.com. And use their promo code, or our promo code, LOCKED15, LOCKED15. You're going to get 15% off your order. Again, use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off over at built.com, or go to builtbar.com. Find them today. Going along here to Locked On SEC, and look, we normally do our honorable mentions here. There just wasn't a whole lot. We had our winners, we had our losers who depressed, and normally we give you our honorable mentions. Just not a full slate of SEC games this past weekend. Not a full slate this weekend. So I figured let's do some early betting lines from our friends over at BetOnline.ag, and we'll get to take a look a little bit at some of the games happening this weekend. We're very early. Again, we'll preview them later this week, but let's take a look at those betting lines.
EPL early betting lines.
All right. Half the league was off this past week. The other half is off this week. LSU, Alabama, Texas A&M, South Carolina, and Arkansas, they will all sit at home this weekend. So let's take a look at some of this week's 4-game slate. This Saturday, 2 p.m. Central, 3 Eastern. It will be 3-4 Missouri at 2-6 Vanderbilt on the SEC Network. Missouri is a 16.5-point road favorite. Look, everybody's going to be watching the cocktail party, so I don't think many people are going to be watching the Mizzou-Vandy game. But I'll just say this. Mizzou better cover that number. I know they have had issues, but most of Mizzou's issues have been defensively. Vanderbilt has no offense to speak of, so Missouri better score. They better score a lot of points. And if they struggle at all defensively with Vandy, well, they have got issues. I think Missouri's going to cover those points, but we'll assess it a little bit more later in the week. At 2:30 Central, 3:30 Eastern, it'll be the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Number 1 undefeated 7-0 Georgia Bulldogs versus the 4-3, kind of stubbing their toe down the stretch, the Florida Gators. That'll be on CBS. Georgia rather, is opened at a 2-touchdown favorite. It's kind of stayed there. More and more I look at this, you wonder, is this one where Georgia will jump out to the early lead, get a big lead, and then maybe Florida gets the backdoor cover late? There's no doubt Dan Mullen's a good play caller. There's no doubt Emory Jones has been really good this year. Anthony Richardson has had some moments. But against this Georgia defense, I just don't think. I know it's a rivalry. I know sometimes you just throw out the stats, throw out the numbers in a rivalry series. But, man, the Georgia defense has been one of the best, if not the best, in the Kirby Smart era. And, of course, just in recent history in Georgia, they've had some great defenses. This is probably the best. I don't think Florida's going to be able to score many points at all in Georgia. If I had to make a bet at least this early in the week, I'm taking Georgia minus the points. They're just, again, 2 touchdowns. Doesn't matter. Probably beat them by 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. Question is, how many points can Georgia's defense score, or Georgia's offense score, against Florida's defense? We'll talk more on that later in the week as we assess this one. Another game at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. It'll be number 10 Ole Miss, who is 6-1, at number 18 Auburn, who is 5-2. That'll be on ESPN. This will be a really, really good night game on ESPN. Auburn is just a 1-point home favorite, despite Ole Miss being a top 10 team, despite them being among the nation's leaders in running the football, despite Matt Corral being a Heisman contender. It's Auburn who finds themselves as the 1-point favorite at home. I just feel like this is a real put up or shut up game for Lane Kiffin. He said, get your popcorn ready. You got embarrassed by Alabama. You survived a scare against Arkansas where they on a failed 2-point conversion. Your defense and offense both played outstanding this past week against lame duck Coach O and LSU. The question is, can you win in a rough road environment at Auburn this weekend, who's maybe a little bit better than some people expect? Bo Nix is playing well as of late. And early inclination is to say, yes, Ole Miss does get it done, but I know I'm going to talk myself into Auburn as the week rolls along. Go look at what Bo Nix did a week ago. I like how he's playing right now. I like the ground game from Auburn. I think they're going to be able to move the football in Ole Miss, at least on the ground. Early inclination would be Ole Miss to cover the 1 point, but I'll give you my pick later in the week. And then the other night game, 6 p.m. Central, 7 Eastern. It'll be number 12 Kentucky. They are 6-1 on the year at 4-3 Mississippi State. That'll be on the SEC Network. The big rivalry between Kentucky and Mississippi State. I know it's a weird crossover game, but Kentucky, they're just a 1-point road favorite despite being a top 12 team. Last time we saw Kentucky, they were getting their brains beat in by Georgia, but I thought there were some positives in that one. They didn't have Josh Ali. Chris Rodriguez in the ground game, they were really shut down. But I think Kentucky's going to be able to move the ball. I think they're going to be able to score. They're going to have to score against Mississippi State because, Will Rogers and Mike Leach, they're going to fling it all over the field. But Kentucky's defense is good. This will be a great test for Kentucky's defense. So we've seen play lights out at times this year. Can you take away that passing attack from Mississippi State? Can you force them into some turnovers, some interceptions? I do think the Kentucky defense is going to get a couple of picks, but crazy that Kentucky is just a 1-point road favorite. Starkville can be a tough place to play, but I think Kentucky is going to cover that 1 point, and that is a quick look at the early betting lines in the SEC, and that is just about going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Now go make your second listen, and that is checking out some of our other great SEC podcasts on the Locked On Podcast Network. You check out Locked On Auburn with Zach Blackerby. You can check out Locked On Bulldogs, talking all things Georgia, Locked On Gators. Tons of great podcasts. Go check them out wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Chris Gordy. We will talk to you guys tomorrow. We'll be talking a lot about some of the games happening this week and really finding out who is going to figure into the college football playoff, where some of these other teams are going to be going to bowl games, and we'll get you all the latest news and notes like JT Daniels play again for Georgia. Is it just the Stetson Bennett show? We'll discuss all that throughout the rest of the week here on Locked On SEC.